Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Stephanie Zeverino with Belmont Village, coming to you from our beautiful Fort Lauderdale location, as you can see from this view behind me. And we are thrilled to have Kristin Gustashaw on today as our presenter to discuss the MIND diet, developed by nutritional epidemiologists at Rush University Medical Center, which includes foods and nutrients that research has shown to be beneficial for brain health. After today's discussion, we'll open it up to Q&A, and she'll try to get to as many questions that time will allow. So please be sure to put your questions in the Q&A section on this webinar. Directly following the webinar, I will introduce Susan Berger, our family advisor, who will tell you more about Belmont Village. Okay, so let's get started. Kristin Gustashaw is an advanced level clinical dietitian working in adult nutrition, disease, and wellness, and is considered a subject matter expert in gerontological nutrition. She also serves on a research committee for students' thesis, entitled The Development of a Questionnaire for Registered Dietitian Nutritionists and Speech Language Pathologists to determine the perceptions and practice patterns of the National Dysphagia Diet. She is also an instructor of clinical nutrition at Rush University, and we welcome Kristin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie. I'm excited to be able to hopefully translate nutritional science effectively into something you will actually eat. We actually just had our national conference just wrap up on Tuesday. And one of the things they emphasized the most was being able to take nutritional science, which is a very STEM focused, science-based type of knowledge, and making it accessible to a consumer. And that's kind of what my passion is and has been throughout my entire career, because it doesn't really matter the why if you don't know the how. And I'm here to hopefully be able to provide both if you have questions. So if I were in person with you today, I'd ask for a raise of hands of how many people have heard about the MIND diet. And, it's only been around for, the past 6-7 years now. And it stands for the Mediterranean Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. Now, in healthcare and in most professions, acronyms are really tricky. There's so many of them, but obviously you can see in certain circumstances why they can really help us. So many of you have heard about the Mediterranean diet. It's a very, kind of generic regional type of description of a group of people who eat certain ways. And then the DASH diet is actually another acronym that stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And that's been around for a really long time now. And what this diet did was these researchers pulled together all of the data that we had at the time, looking at what made the Mediterranean diet healthy, what made the DASH diet healthy. And they came up with what now we feel is near and dear to us as the MIND diet. And as we go through the presentation today, you'll understand why, as a dietitian, it's one of my favorites, but why also I think it's really something that each and every one of you here today can try to incorporate, or already find out that you're incorporating many of these pieces to keep yourself as healthy as possible throughout your life. So today we're going to learn about the relationship of dementia and diets as it relates to disease. So I always start off a little bit dismal, I feel, talking about the why we want to do this. But if we don't resonate with something and see the value in it, no matter what it is in our life, we're not going to be very successful at accomplishing it and doing it. So I really want to make sure everybody understands this isn't just a diet that Kristin thinks is going to keep you healthy or help your memory or cognition. This really is a diet that can help you live longer, enjoy life to its entirety, and to its fullest. And depending on where your health status is now, you will be able to see dramatic changes if you haven't already incorporated these things in your diet. Then we're going to learn about some different diets as they relate to the mind diet, because everyone always wonders, well, is this the new fad? Is this just something that's going to be coming and going? We're going to talk about what are the meat and bones of this. And ironically, there's not as much meat in this diet. And then learn about what foods to avoid. I love this diet too, because it's a pretty short list. And the most important part probably of this presentation is throughout trying to empower you to change your mind about the foods that you eat and choose to maximize your brain health. And I like to consider our bodies as more of a vascular highway. So the mind diet, very appropriately, is talking about neurodegenerative delay, so preventing any damage to our brain. But the thing that's amazing that goes along with it is your brain is connected to your entire vascular system. So not only will this diet help your brain, it will help your heart, it will help your other organs, it will help your biggest organ, your skin. And there's not one thing that this is going to help and yet hinder. All right. Now, if you have any diseases that prevent you from eating particular foods, you may have to be a little choosier which category you may need to limit or restrict. But then that's where you're going to take that mind diet and see another health professional, see a dietitian and say, how can I manipulate, or what should I replace if there's a particular food that I can't consume because of whatever other problem I may have. So this is where we talk a little bit dismal about our brains and Alzheimer's. Now, I want to remind everybody that Alzheimer's is only one type of dementia, and I work in 2 different neurology clinics at Rush. And we very rarely talk directly about Alzheimer's. We talk about dementia. And Alzheimer's dementia, again, is only one of many diseases that can hurt our brain. So this diet, came about directly because the researchers were looking at Alzheimer's and how food affects that particular disease. But what we keep finding is that it's a neuroprotective for all brain health. So Alzheimer's is only one thing that could hurt your brain, but your brain is such an amazing, it's the biggest supercomputer on the planet. And this diet can help you ward off not only Alzheimer's, but other dementias as well. And we see how fast Alzheimer's is inflicting our society. And by mid-century, somebody is going to develop the disease every 30 seconds. Now, that doesn't mean that it's, running rampant like the plague. There's a couple factors of causing that. We all know that our country is aging, and there's a larger percentage of people that are becoming over 65 on a regular basis. And we're getting better at diagnosing this disease. Okay, so it's not that all of a sudden somebody's genetic makeup is changed or there's a bacteria that's causing such a thing, but collectively, there's a lot of reasons that these graphs are getting darker. It also doesn't mean these darker states have anything particularly dangerous about living in them. One of the reasons by state they're darker is also because the average age of a lot of these states is higher. So, you have to be really careful when you look at research and statistics and data, because they can really paint a picture that can be very deceiving if you're not really paying attention to it. And then this study came out showing us that the darker graph, the darker bars are people who were frail. And then the pre-frail is the middle, and then the non-frail is on the left. And what this showed was with all dementias of any kind, it was very, very highly correlated that those people were also frail. And the way we define frailty is we're trying to harness how we define it in research so we can compare things so they don't become apples and oranges, but it's weakness, being slow when you walk, unintentional weight loss, and low physical activity, and self-reported exhaustion. And I don't know about you, but on any given day, I may even diagnose myself with frailty. So this is not something that you just wake up and you feel kind of tired. this is something that if you go to the doctor, hopefully on your annual or biannual basis, and they're checking how your grip strength is, even that test alone can indicate how frail somebody may or may not be. And look at how dramatic any dementia is affected, and Alzheimer's dementia, and any non-Alzheimer's dementia. So in every single category, if you're frail, your likelihood of having dementia as well is very high. And how do we combat frailty? And that's where the dietitian comes in. Okay. So this is another statistic. And again, I don't mean to start off too dismal, but I want you to understand how these things play a role in our diet. And what you're looking at here is the number of changes in deaths as from 2000 to 2019. And this is from the Alzheimer's Association. And the number of Alzheimer related deaths and other dementias is higher than heart failure, stroke, ischemic heart disease, hypertension, COPD, cancer, diabetes. The only one that actually has gone down is chronic kidney disease. So we really have a lot of work to do. And this study shows that in all of these cases, and the reason why this study is up here, or this research, is that the purple bar is people with Alzheimer's and dementia. So we talked about how frailty and dementia go hand in hand, but all of these other diseases were this much more likely to occur in people who also had Alzheimer's. And each one of these diseases can directly be helped by affecting your diet and changes in your lifestyle. So COPD, congestive heart failure, okay, chronic kidney disease, coronary artery disease, strokes, diabetes, cancer. In every one of these cases, if we ate a diet more rich in fruits and vegetables, we could combat all of these diseases. If we controlled our cholesterol levels, if we controlled our blood sugars and our blood pressures, if we didn't smoke, and ironically, I was just talking about this the other day, you don't see as many people smoking anymore, but you still see a handful of people doing it, and some have even gone on to vaping, so it becomes less apparent that they may be doing it. As a culture, we are overweight, but I will say in my profession over 25 years, working with the older adult population, I am not seeing as much obesity. However, that's going to be changing in the next 20 and 30 years of my profession. So the current older adult doesn't have as much of a problem with gaining weight. They, or having too much weight on, they have more of a struggle with maintaining or preventing unintentional weight loss. But in all of these circumstances, as you get older, depending on how old you are yet, you want to look at this and see, wow, if I take care of my brain, all of these other diseases are less likely to occur. And then what is the cost of this disease? It's not only a disease that affects the patient, but the caregiver as well. The caregiver is the darker bars. And in every case, the caregiver didn't have as much food. They couldn't afford a balanced meal. They cut the meal sizes. They ate less, and they were hungry because they didn't have as much money. So in every one of these circumstances, if they don't get that under control, they are setting the stage to lose their role as a caregiver and become the patient. So this is a disease that we need to really harness all dementias, and remember that this diet isn't just for somebody who has a disease. It is for everybody on this planet to try to follow. This is another one where the very high levels of stress to the caregiver and emotional stress, physical burden was just very imperative in both cases. And then nearly 40% of all deaths, I want to point out, in America result from heart disease, stroke, and can be attributed to the smoking, physical inactivity, poor diet, and alcohol misuse. not who your parents were, not your socioeconomic status, but things that were all in your control, things that you have the power over. And I will say that just because I may know what to do, or as a dietitian in general, know what to do, it doesn't mean that this makes it any easier to actually do it. So, you'd have to imagine if it was easy to stop smoking and easy to be more physically active and have a better diet and not misuse alcohol, we could cure 40% of the diseases that exist out there, from heart disease and stroke. So I'm not minimizing how difficult it can be, but today you're going to be at least given tools, and you have to be the one who decides if you're going to use those or not. And this is another reminder, and again, in our culture, we all are overeating, obesity, it's all we hear. But this slide shows us it's a bit of a more newer term called inflammaging. It's a new immune metabolic viewpoint. It's a way of looking at how we age. And inflammation, I think we know that is such a buzzword right now in society. Inflammation is something we want to avoid. It's like putting your car in the garage because it's going to get eaten up by acid rain, right? We put it away to protect it. So we have all these inflammatory processes going on in our body between stress and what we're eating, other diseases, aging. But here on the right shows you that people who overconsume are in a higher inflammatory state, but people who underconsume are also in a higher inflammatory state. You can almost see that these are almost parallel, that if you undereat or overeat, you are causing your body to be more inflamed. But if you eat normally, look at how much it plummets. This is not just a dot to dot Kristin drew. This is research showing what happens when you choose to just eat differently. Okay. So what's a healthy diet? I know that's why everybody kind of joined on today. So we'll get there. But I love these old, where we came from. In the 40s, and again, I usually have a raise of hands here, but in the 40s, the government came out with the first recommended dietary allowances, and they were established by the National Research Council. And if anyone remembers why, it was not because we were all overeating. It was because we found our country having nutritional deficiencies. People were not eating enough of the foods. Our foods didn't have a lot of the nutrients that our bodies needed. And then in the 43, they came out with the basic 7, again, focusing more on dealing with a food shortage. And they very quickly changed that to the basic 4: meat, milk, fruits, and vegetables and grains. So they clumped those fruits and veggies, produce. But again, it was because we had a shortage in nutrition and we weren't eating enough nutrients. So we needed to help our society say, hey, at least get in enough of these things to prevent deficiency. And if you've ever heard about Wonder Bread, which now as dietitians, we say don't eat because it's this gummy kind of pasty bread that doesn't have a lot of fiber or other nutrients in it. But Wonder Bread actually was a wonder and saved a lot of children from nutrient deficiency because it was one of the first fortified breads that was ever available to the community. And it came along as if it had a little vitamin boost in it. And it really was a very helpful thing to incorporate. Now we have a lot of better resources, and most of our foods are fortified. The whole grain industry is very fortified. Even our milk in this country is fortified with vitamin D and calcium, to the point where we just assume all milk comes with vitamin D. But that's where they chose to put it. If you go to other countries, it may not be a great source of vitamin D. So you really have to know the source of what you're consuming. And then in the 90s, we came up with this glorious pyramid. And I say that in jest because nobody really understood what to do with this pyramid. And then usually Tufts comes up with a counterpart. Tufts University has an amazing program with older adult nutrition, and they came up with this parallel pyramid And it focused a lot on fluids, realizing older adults are not getting enough hydration. And I could talk an entire hour on hydration. And they also started putting these little dots around here with fiber. So we saw that aging came along with needing less calories. So the pyramid of food was smaller, a bigger emphasis on hydration, and calcium, vitamin D, and B12. And today, even almost 20 years later, we are still focusing on not getting enough calcium, vitamin D, and B12 in our diets as older adults. We're still struggling with fiber, and we're still struggling with water. Though our picture keeps changing, the message still stays the same. So this food guide pyramid, they emphasize on physical activity. And years ago, actually, one of my children thought this is actually the building I worked at. So you can tell that didn't help anybody eat better. And Tufts did a little better job putting some pictures of food on here. They still emphasized on water, but then they went a step further, no pun intended, and put physical activity as the core foundation of our diet. And I know that sounds kind of confusing because you don't eat exercise, but exercise actually even trumps the importance of your diet. Now, you can't get dehydrated and you can't be, you can't stop eating, but you absolutely need to incorporate physical activity into your diet if you want to live this healthy, independent lifestyle to its fullest. Then we talk about now my plate. This is kind of when the internet became more savvy for a lot of people. We got a better image, but also the internet and social media started pushing this picture out. And Tufts again came along with this pyramid. And I really can sink my teeth into this. Half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables. We should have a moderate amount of whole grains and proteins. We call it protein now, not just meat. Even early on in my profession, when I asked people if they ate meat, I meant protein. And most people translated that as they don't eat beef. So we have to be careful about how we're interpreting things. Then it's not just about dairy, but it's all fluids as we get older. All right. And then obviously, unless you're at an ethnic wedding, nobody's stepping on plates. So we had to put the plate, we had to get the exercise off the plate, but keep it in the picture. And then this is one step closer. This is the DASH diet breakdown and the Mediterranean diet. So after all these years of going through what we should be doing, we keep chiseling away at what is probably a better diet. Now, I'll never say best because nutritional science hopefully is always evolving. There are pathways in our body that weren't even in my textbooks. We didn't even know they existed in our body. And the research coming out about gut health and how it's working and adapting. I think it's very important to understand that if you ever go to a healthcare professional and they have nothing new to say, that's more of an alarming statement than if their message changes. Because hopefully they're staying abreast of current research and knowing how we need to adapt to that research and incorporate it into our daily life, just like this mind diet. So for years, we talked about the DASH diet, which both diets are phenomenal. I'm here to say if either of one of these diets are something you follow, there's no reason to change. What the mind diet did was pull out some key components that really rose to the top of the Mediterranean DASH diet and were something we really wanted to incorporate. They looked at what was causing Alzheimer's. What are some correlations, associations? And we looked at incidence of Alzheimer's and how much fruit people ate, or vegetables, or coffee, fish, even light alcohol. And you can see these negative symbols indicate all of those were associated with less diagnoses of Alzheimer's. When we looked back at what people were eating, milk kind of was in question. There wasn't enough to say it was good or bad, and tea, good or bad. And then they went on to look at a healthy diet, which is kind of like a generic term, but again, research sometimes doesn't tease that out enough for us. The DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, and the Japanese diet. And they pulled all of this data together and they came up with the mind diet, which is this hybrid of the Mediterranean and DASH diet. And it was actually developed primarily by Dr. Martha Claire Morris and Dr. Kristin Tangney, who are research study professors at the University of at Rush University. And sadly, Martha has passed away a few years ago, but her research and her legacy continues, and more research keeps coming up behind her, just continuing to prove the benefits of this amazing kind of finding, if you will, or connection. And this was kind of the silver bullet that hit the media, and this was from 2015, and it said the MIND diet was associated with reduced incidence of Alzheimer's. And of course, just a title like that, anything reducing the risk of Alzheimer's, you saw the numbers, they're going up and up and up. But what really was amazing was that this study showed that with late onset Alzheimer's, with older adults who genetic risk factors were a smaller piece of the picture. So we used to think, Alzheimer's was more genetic. This was really showing us that actually, if you acquired Alzheimer's later in life, it was more associated with your diet and lifestyle than if you were diagnosed early on, that had a greater genetic component. So it was kind of this aha moment for us as a profession, saying, this is what we've been saying. If you change your diet, if you change your lifestyle, we can prove that you will end up with less likelihood of acquiring Alzheimer's or all these other things. That is super powerful. And, hopefully something that can motivate some of us. And they looked at almost 1,000 people in this first study, and they followed what they were eating for over 4 years, almost 4.5 years. And this is not a cause and effect diet. We didn't put people on this diet and then they did not end up having Alzheimer's. We looked at what people had been eating and what kind of lifestyles they led. And the people who ate the things that now we call the MIND diet, those were the people that had less diagnoses of Alzheimer's disease. And as a dietitian, and a very realistic dietitian, the other thing I love about this diet is that if you followed the diet 100%, the numbers showed, and that's this dotted line up at the top, it showed that your likelihood, those people in that study, 54% of them were less likely to have Alzheimer's. That's super powerful than people who didn't follow the diet at all down here. And then as a dietitian, like I said, this realistic dietitian is this middle, very dark bar. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, I should ask Dr. T, but people in the middle, this real hard solid line, even if you followed it halfway or partially, those people were 35% less likely. Again, numbers you don't see in research. These were profound numbers that we saw. And as a dietitian, if I can get somebody to even meet me halfway and get 35% less likely to have a dementia or cognitive dysfunction, that's pretty powerful. And then moving on, more and more research showed, that was the initial research. Now we're starting to look at, well, how does this affect other things? And Parkinson's is another one that I specifically work with a lot of patients with Parkinson's and altered mind. But this shows that it was a complete adherence thus far showed that it reduced your risk of dying of cardiovascular disease. And then each unit that you follow of this MIND diet, so the more and more you followed of each of these 10 components, was associated with a 13% reduction. Each step that you took further. So partial compliance got you to 30%, complete compliance got you to 42%. Now, again, numbers blowing it out of the water here with why we should follow it. And then again, as a dietitian though, if it's not easy to do, I'm not gonna get a lot of people calling me back or coming back to see me. So, US News and World Report ranked it as one of the top 5, less than 5 easiest diets to follow year after year after year. Okay. And what are the other diets? So the Mediterranean diet was one of the easiest diets to follow, followed by a Weight Watchers diet, the flexitarian diet, the Mayan diet, and then the DASH diet. So, and again, I'm not saying that you should switch from any of these diets. I'm just saying this hangs above the highest ranks of the diets to follow. And each one of these would fare you very well if you chose to do it. So this is and could be the only slide that I have in the entire presentation. This is the 10 components of the Mind diet and the 5 components we should avoid from our diet. And I tried to keep it as simple as possible, mainly because I want to emphasize that it is just 10 simple things we should try to do on a weekly basis. Most of these aren't even on a daily basis. Every week, if you can kind of reflect back and even take a picture of this, write it down, print it off from the internet, and see how many days a week you can check a box next to any of these items, you will be on your way to protecting your brain, the biggest supercomputer on the planet. So number 1, dark green leafy vegetables 6 times a week. So what does that mean? What is a serving of a dark green leafy vegetable? Well, that is 1 cup. And if you have ever cooked spinach, if you cooked 1 cup of spinach, you would probably have a hard time filling a tablespoon with it. It shrinks down immensely. And I say that for 2 reasons. It doesn't take a lot to hit this criteria. But if you despise dark green leafy vegetables, if you were able to cook it down and even put it in a food processor, you could pepper that into a tomato sauce, into a soup stock. You can hide it in so many things and not even be aware that you were consuming it. So if you love your salads, if you love your greens, phenomenal. And on the 10 to-dos, you can go over the dark green leafy vegetables. All right. This is if you ate 6 cups a week, which is very hard to even make 1 salad with less than 2 cups. But if you ate 6 cups a week, that would be getting you to that 54% reduction that we talked about. And then any other vegetable, any vegetable, it didn't care if it was corn, which always gets a bad rap. It didn't care if it was potatoes, another bad rap. If you ate any other vegetable, 1 serving a day. So if you look at, 6 servings for the dark greens is almost once a day. But if you ate a serving of greens and 1 other vegetable a day, you'd be following this diet to a T. And what is a serving? It's a half a cup. A half a cup of any other vegetable a day would get you following this diet 100%. So it doesn't take a lot, but I know if most of you are probably at home right now, and even if I went into my refrigerator, if the produce isn't there, it's hard to consume. It's impossible to consume, I mean. But if the produce is there and not ready to eat, it's going to be very hard to consume. And I was just talking to another woman yesterday who said, I don't eat my vegetables if I don't take a day to prep. It may take me an hour to prep vegetables throughout my day or 1 day. But then I have it to open my refrigerator and just grab and make salads and make so many different recipes as it's sitting there waiting for me. I have cabbage shredded already. I don't just keep it as a whole head. I have my lettuce and my greens already washed and ready to go. I have, and I'm skipping down to number 5, the beans, but I have a can of garbanzo beans rinsed and ready, already to be tossed onto a salad. I don't have to do it every single time I eat, because if you think you're going to do it every single time you eat, you will not do it. And that's not, again, me saying it, that's what research shows. So number 3, nuts, 5 servings a week. And that is only a 1/4 cup of nuts. It's about, 16 almonds, 12 walnuts, halves. It's not a lot of nuts. So again, if you love them, great. This is one food that you could potentially overeat. You have to be careful buying them without extra salts. If you do struggle with eating nuts plain, I recommend that you toss them in just a teeny bit of, put them in a baggie with a little bit of olive oil and get really creative with your herbal blends and then roast them in the oven. And even just roasting a nut with nothing else added to it adds an amazing boost in its flavor profile. It makes your house smell great. And it's just a really excellent way to enhance the flavor of a nut without adding added salt. But I've even gone to restaurants where they have a small appetizers where it's just warm roasted nuts. And they've added like cayenne pepper or dill, and they've done all these different, a Greek variety, an Italian flavor. And, you know, kind of the sky's the limit. And right now, roasting nuts in your home and giving, you know, that great little warm, cozy feeling and smell is perfect for fall time. Then number 4, berries. Now we're kind of leaving our berry season, but 2 or more servings of berries a week, and 1 cup of berries is a serving. So it's not a lot, but that's almost tricky because with berries, they go bad fast. So to keep them in the refrigerator, you can help. Some berries, you know, you can buy those little strawberry containers that actually do help reduce the mold. You can play with your crisper drawers to get that humidity just right. But they're still, at the end of the day, tricky to keep fresh. And this is a great place to have frozen berries in the freezer at all times. I always have fresh when I can get it, whether it's be on sale or they look good, and we try to eat them up straight away. But I try to catch that moment before they go bad, if we haven't gotten through them, and wash them. If they're berries with a stem, I cut that stems off and then I freeze my own fresh. Or I always have a backup of frozen berries, and frozen wild blueberries are amazing to have around because they're super sweet. They defrost very quickly. You can eat them with a spoon. They almost have a bit of a sorbet texture to them, and you can add them into other things. You can toss them on a salad, and they're just super easy if you think outside the box about how I can incorporate some extra berries in my day. Number 5 is the beans, and this again is any beans. This is black beans, red beans, pinto beans. And I am a proponent of canned, but I would recommend that you rinse them well and in a colander and then keep them in the refrigerator so you can always grab and go. I even eat them as a snack sometimes just on their own, but they're an excellent thing to incorporate into a soup, onto a salad. You know, you just have to start getting them accessible to you. And that's not to say that drying and buying dried beans and soaking your own isn't an excellent thing to do. If you have the time, that's phenomenal to do. But if you don't have the time and you think canned beans are bad, so I'm not even going to bother, then that's the wrong message. I want you to buy the canned versus none. In fact, I put together a research, we pulled a paper together and we did research on looking at the health benefits of canned versus fresh, and people who ate canned foods actually had better healthy eating indexes, which is a test you can do to see how healthy people are eating. And it wasn't because the canned products were better, it's because they actually ate them. So if you just skip it because it's too hard for whatever reason, then you're going to eat unhealthy because you're not eating it. Then number 6, whole grains. This is about 3 servings of whole grains a week. Now, if you're buying a loaf of bread and you can just eat whole grains, that's phenomenal. But this can be whole grain bread. It can be a whole grain pasta. It can be quinoa. It can be barley. It can be oatmeal. It can be oat bran. There's just a multitude of whole grains out there, farro, that you can try to incorporate. I know a lot of people love chicken soup, especially in the fall time, or soups in general. And I kind of challenge you to get creative about what kind of, you know, you can keep your noodle in there, but try to add another grain to give it a little boost of nutrients and get you following this MIND diet. Even throwing some beans in there would be another way for getting your soup a little souped up, if you will. And spinach, even taking, and this is something you can do per bowl. So if you make up a big batch of soup, you can take a handful of spinach and throw it in your own portion, and it'll wilt really quickly, or you can microwave it if it's cold, and then it will incorporate very easily into that soup. And it's not something you have to kind of force on everybody you might be serving that soup to. And then fish was so powerful, they showed that even 1 serving a week, and that's 3 ounces. That's about, you know, a flat, about the size of a phone, you know, or a deck of cards if it's a chunky, you know, piece of salmon. once a week. Now, this doesn't debunk all of the research saying that we should get at least 2 servings of fish a week and maybe even fish oil pills if you don't. But fish was that powerful that even once a week showed a dramatic difference. Poultry, the same, even just 2 servings of poultry a week. Turkey and chicken. And, again, we're not going to ignore, it didn't say that what white meat versus dark meat, skin versus no skin. This study didn't get that detailed. So we're not going to ignore all the other cardiac studies, other vascular studies saying that we should eat the lean meats, the lean poultry, okay? Olive oil as your main source of cooking is number 10. I don't mean you to drink it. It just means when you're using preparations, use olive oil. If you don't like olive oil, avocado oil is a great alternative. It didn't hit this study, but avocado is a very crisp, clean flavor oil, and it also has a lot of other health benefits. So that's one thing. Some people don't like that olive taste, but you can replace it with avocado oil. And then 1 glass of wine a day. Now it's about a 4 to 6 ounce glass of wine. That's not find your biggest goblet and drink it. And also, it's not a requirement. If you don't drink wine, you can skip that one. If you can't drink wine, you can skip that one. And some people often ask me, well, what about other alcohol? Alcohol in general has been shown in moderation in this 1 serving a day to be neuroprotective. But in excess, it has a dramatic opposite effect. And then talking about what not to do. And I want to point out very clearly, there's only 5 things. But red meat, and a lot of people are excited, red meat, you can have 4 servings a week of your 3 ounces. So some people thought red meat is just utterly taboo for my brain, and it's not. This study showed at least 4 servings a week is okay. Obviously, can't skip the other research out there saying the leaner the meat, the better. Number 2, butter and margarine. Now, I was sad to see that butter was on the list. I could give margarine away and never touch it again. But butter, I really love. It's one of my coveted foods as a dietitian. It's hard to say, but it says I can have less than 1 tablespoon a day. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, well, that's not very restrictive. In fact, if you take out a stick of butter from your cupboard or your refrigerator, there's 8 tablespoons in it. So that would mean I would be able to go through a whole stick of butter or a little less a week by myself. And to me, that's not very restrictive. So, you do want to be mindful of your butter, but it's not as restricting as it kind of seems. But cheese is. Now, I think most people who try to follow this diet, cheese is the hardest thing to follow. It's less than 1 serving, not a day, but a week. And I want everybody to remember, though, if you did all the other things and you never even got your cheese under control, that doesn't mean you're going to acquire dementia or have neurodegenerative delay. It just means that's probably not the one you want to start with if cheese is your favorite. So chisel away at all the other ones and then, see where cheese might fall for you. And pastries and sweets, I feel like a lot of people felt like it fell like in the red meat category. They were like, well, 5 days a week, well, I don't eat dessert every day. But it's the portion sizes for this that get really tricky for people, I feel. It's one of the old fashioned size cupcakes that you baked off in a 12-cup pan. It is more of the small Halloween size candy bar, not a full size candy bar. That would equal 1. It's 2 Oreo cookies or Chips Ahoy type cookies. So that can get a little tricky and dicier for people. But again, if you're doing all the other ones, slowly incorporate the ones that are hard for you. In fact, as a dietitian, I feel like people always try to pick the hardest thing first. And I'm always telling them that's the last thing you should do, because every change you make for the better doesn't have to hurt. If you're doing it, it will help you and it will lead you to those better changes and more energy and more excitement and more motivation to do what you need to do. And then fried servings, depending on your lifestyle, most older adults that I've worked with, fried and fast food isn't as tricky, but that does mean pan frying in oil. So if you're doing that, you want to try to do more baking, more broiling, more grilling. and trying to get that extra fat away from the meats that you might be frying. All right, now I know that we are about 1 minute till I'm supposed to stop talking. But I could talk about the mind diet all day. So the one thing I want to mention last is that if you were to add all of this food up that you're supposed to do, it would not equal 7 days a week of 3 full meals. So I want to remind everybody, this is just what should be included into a full diet. That's why you can double or triple some of the good things to do. And dairy didn't hit the good or the bad, but I'm a huge proponent of dairy. So I do recommend that we all be drinking about 3 cups or 3 servings of dairy a day, not the cheese, but the yogurt and the milk. And cottage cheese, people kind of ask me where that falls. Cottage cheese is kind of more the dairy than the cheese factor. Okay. So Stephanie, I hope I kind of hit that mark with time, and I would love to take questions if we have them.
Oh, we have them, Kristin.
Great.
We certainly do. You know, as you're talking, I was thinking, I'm just going to move to Italy. Would that be okay?
Yes. Yes. It's
Just
too
where
bad
my
that doesn't,
ancestors-
that's not covered in healthcare. Just move
No,
to
I
Italy.
know. But being Italian, I thought, just everything, listening to how what you were talking about, this is the way I grew up eating. This is how my grandparents ate. And they lived a very healthy life, well into their 90s, cognitively, amazingly together. So thank you for that. We've got so many wonderful comments, Kristin, on how well you articulate everything and put it in really simple terms, but we do have a bunch of questions. So let's get to them.
Awesome.
Let me see. The first one is, I read that in the past times, especially the Inuits ate primarily meat and fish, very few vegetables and fruits. Did they suffer from dementia in greater numbers?
So when we look at the past, what we have to remember is that people's diets, our life expectancy is almost double of how far we go in the past, so when you talked about your grandparents, even I'll use them as an example, living super healthy lives, they had other problems to worry about. And now today, even though they ate a lot of meat and fish and not less produce, they didn't have the fast food. They just innately didn't have access to too much food.
Right.
And it's hard to do something bad if you can't do it too often, right? Unless it's poison, there's usually room for a lot of leeway.
Good. Okay. If you are a vegetarian, what should one substitute in for poultry? What is your thought about eating tofu?
So tofu is phenomenal. So that's the soybean. I'm a huge proponent of tofu, and in any form that you like it. And I recommend then you really want to incorporate nuts and seeds and your beans and the tofu. Those are phenomenal sources of, and fish. So yeah, I work with a lot of people who have even just innately just lost their taste for meats. And you can eat an extremely healthy diet and get great sources of protein. The only thing, if you're vegan, and just aging, we have to be very careful you get your B12 checked. Everybody should be getting their B12 checked yearly, because we stop absorbing B12 from our food the right way. And you may need to take a B12 supplement, but if you're not absorbing it, then you may need the B12 shot.
Gotcha. Okay. A lot of vegans on here. There's a lot of vegan questions.
Okay.
This
Great.
one is not one of them, though. What are your thoughts on green drinks, i.e. fruits and vegetable juices, which are commercially available?
So what I recommend is you really, really turn around that label and see what you're actually doing, because marketing has such an extremely powerful way of making things look so healthy for you. So you really want to see, what are you actually consuming? Is it the whole fruit? Are there any other additives that your body really doesn't need? Time and time again, like stevia is a good alternative sweetener. If I had to pick one, that sometimes becomes a question. Stevia is like a plant-based sweetener. It's not a chemical. That's actually the only one that even like weight programs like bariatrics, when we do surgeries and things, it's the only one that's even optional for them that we recommend. But you want to make sure there's no other like alternative sweeteners, see if there's any sugar alcohols in them. And if there are herbs and things, they may be fine. You know, you may not be aware of them, like spirilla or whatever, but make sure you know what it is and that it's not going to interact with any medications you might be on. And a lot of people will over consume those beverages. So making sure you're incorporating it in and not, you know, replacing it with that and not getting other nutrients your body might need.
Now, something that I just heard of and just found out is something called monk. Is it monk sugar?
Monk fruit.
Mm-hmm. Monk fruit.
So
monk
yeah,
fruit.
so it's phenomenal. It's a super sweetener, and it is. Monk fruit would be good on the label. That'd be okay.
Okay. All right, good. Let's see. Mediterranean diets include lots of goat cheese. Should one limit goat cheese to under 1 serving per week as well?
So goat cheese is a healthier cheese. However, again, without knowing the person's full diet, it's a hard question to answer. So if that's a really great source of protein and that's where you're getting your dairy, I wouldn't say you have to do that. I would make sure you're filling in all the other foods before you cut one out.
Okay.
But goat cheese is a healthier of the cheeses.
Okay, good. Let's see, talking about seeds versus nuts. I eat lots of pumpkin seeds. Is this good as nuts? Do seeds count as nuts? And I also eat lots of chia seeds. And what do they count as?
So chia, flax, even hemp is a big one right now. And pumpkin, all of those seeds, they are different than nuts, but they're phenomenal. They're excellent source of nutrients. They're an excellent source of protein and fiber. So I recommend that they incorporate somehow into your daily life. This particular study, again, it was, you know, we have to remember when research comes out, it's what we have accessible to us. Right. So the forms that people filled out to question, it didn't tease out what kind of vegetable, right? But if we have, as we progress and we know like berries, blueberries, there's a lot of research saying that blueberries may be the best berry, but this study wasn't able to tease that out. So nuts and seeds, I guarantee, are probably going to keep coming on the pike. And if not in this diet, there's certainly enough data saying they're phenomenal to eat.
Yep. Love them. I love them. Let's see. I've been eating gluten-free. Can you discuss how I can eat grains? Thoughts on how gluten affects the brain?
Okay, well, so gluten intolerant, there's gluten disease, where celiac disease, where actually the gluten molecule actually kills off the villi, all of your absorbing capabilities of your gut. So there's that. If you have celiac disease, you cannot incorporate whole grains. You have to find non-gluten sources of this compound. If you have intolerance, again, you don't need to incorporate it. So if you are trying, it's hard to know, you know, just by that. But if you're trying to avoid whole grains, and any of that, then I would say beans is a really good, and your dark greens to try to incorporate enough fiber. And again, any other vegetable. So I would take the whole grains out and just double up those veggies.
Good. Okay. Let's see. We haven't really talked about eggs. Where do eggs fall on this list?
Again, thank goodness, eggs and dairy didn't get knocked off the list, because I'm a proponent of both of them. In fact, eggs they're not as cheap as they used to be, but eggs are an excellent source of protein for a low economical price. The versatility of an egg, I always am amazed at an egg cracked, what it looks like, and an egg fried, and an egg scrambled, and an egg hard boiled. It it's like a magic thing that it can be so many things in our diet. So if you're looking to get that as a great source of protein, I'm a proponent of it. It's loaded with choline, which is excellent for brain health and our eyes. And choline isn't very prevalent in most of our foods. So I really love that. If for whatever reason you have cholesterol issues, we know that it's not just about eating cholesterol, it's about saturated fat and so many other things. But if for whatever reason your doctor has said you have to cut back cholesterol in your diet, then I would say, you know, 1 egg and a bunch of egg whites and still get in that egg if you enjoy it.
I was going to ask you
really,
about that.
Pardon?
I was going to ask you about that. Yolk in or yolk out?
Again, the yolk is where the choline is, where most of the nutrients are. So I say at least a few yolks, unless you've otherwise been told you can't.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, great. Let's see. Somebody asked about eggs also. What is the proper range for B12?
What do you mean by like your
Yeah, I don't, what is the proper range for B12? So,
well, when you get, so they'll tell you the level of B12. Now a lot of people, if you're taking B12 supplements, I will say that it may be higher. B12 is very hard to become toxic. So if your range of B12, I'm not sure if they're asking exactly, but usually at least just make sure it's within normal range.
Okay.
I'll just answer it that way.
Okay, fair enough. Will you please comment on Greek yogurt, granola, and honey?
Okay, together it sounds like a perfect breakfast. Okay.
Yep.
You do have to be careful that the honey and the type of Greek yogurt itself can have added sugar. So in an ideal world, I would buy the full fat, non-flavored Greek yogurt, and then add your own honey. Be modest with how much honey you're adding. This is where I would think it would be a phenomenal place to do those frozen berries. You can do fresh, but frozen, if you put frozen berries and make it kind of like an overnight oats, you can add oatmeal to it. You can add your berries, keep it in the fridge, and it'll just kind of absorb all those flavors and even turn it kind of purple or pink, whatever berry you're putting in it. Granola, there's a lot of good granola out there. There's a lot of bad granola out there. So you want to make sure, again, read that label. Is there a lot of added sugars, or is it mostly a actually healthy thing? This is where you can make your own granola with all those seeds and nuts that we talked about.
Yeah.
You could even find on the internet how to roast up some oats, taking your own honey and trying to crisp it up yourself to add that as like a crunchy thing. So that's how I'd answer that.
Sounds good. I think we have time. Let's see. Yeah, time for one more question, okay. Kristin. Let's see. I'm currently on the paleo diet and want to switch to the Mind diet. Ghee is allowed on paleo. I buy grass-fed ghee. Does it count the same as butter? And then also, please talk about the best whole grains. Okay.
So with ghee, there's a lot of, I also work with the ketogenic diet for neuroprotection with epilepsy. And there is a lot of research saying that ghee is better. However, I wouldn't blanketly say we should just all start eating ghee, because when you follow a particular diet, its benefit typically only comes with following it in its entirety. So if you pick and choose things from particular diets, you may end up with like kind of a mess of a problem. But ghee can fit. So I would say for the average person, be mindful of how much ghee you use. Okay. If you're really being strict with all the other components of your diet, ghee would be a good choice, you know, as potentially even dropping into like as your main source of nutrients, like an olive oil. But again, that's kind of tricky to say blanketly, but you can incorporate ghee. Then the second part of that question was?
Also, please talk about the best whole grains.
Oh, whole grains. Okay. The best whole grains are the ones you're going to eat. Okay. That's the hands down, so because if you put the wrong whole grain in somebody, they're not going to touch it. So I'm a huge proponent of quinoa, bulgur, and farro I don't like so much. But barley, I love barley.
Ugh,
I
love
love
barley.
it. I love quinoa. And then oats, some people love oatmeal. Some people despise that texture. So oat bran is like basically a pulverized version, and it's very nutrient dense. So, those would be the ways I would answer that. But all of them are going to be phenomenal. And if you do love them all, the best way to eat them is variety, because each one of them is a little higher or a little lower in different nutrients. And that's just where you're going to get this amazing rainbow of nutrition if you can keep incorporating different things.
Oh my God, this has been wonderful. Kristin Gustashaw, we love you. We love you.
Thank
We've had
you.
so many unbelievable comments that this has been a fabulous presentation. We really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for talking about this very important subject, because we all need help with dieting, and also don't forget about exercising, everyone. So thank you, Kristin. We appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan Berger, our family ambassador. Thanks.
I'm blown away, Kristin. I learned so much, and so many of the comments that came across were how fabulous your presentation was.
Well, thank you, everyone.
For 24 years, Belmont Village has owned and operated best-in-class, fully licensed senior living communities. We're founded on the belief that seniors deserve to live self-directed lives in a supportive community, filled with new friendships and interests, safety and security, quality and value, and above all, a place that they can call home. But at Belmont, it's all about that quality of life. It's about health, energy, and purpose. We want all of our residents to stay healthy and active, and in so doing, to live well. We know at Belmont that what you eat and drink, how much you exercise, and the way you socialize are all equally important to successful aging. And I think Kristin reiterated that beautifully. But we believe in a person-centered approach in providing our services, and residents receive help with activities of daily living as they need them. Although residents' needs may vary, they can count on our caring and compassionate staff who are committed every day to providing person-centered care. But they can also count on our nurses. We have trained medical professionals on site 24 hours a day and dedicated to the healthcare needs of each of our residents. Most importantly, they're there to be the conduit between the doctor and the resident and family. But we know that successful aging also involves staying active. Whether our residents want to kickstart their day with group fitness or one-on-one exercise, our goal is always to stimulate both their minds and body at whatever level they feel successful. And what better way to stay physically engaged than under the watchful eyes of our team of licensed physical therapists on site. And we provide a state-of-the-art gym fully equipped with senior-friendly equipment. To specifically address the needs and abilities of residents with mild cognitive impairment and early stage memory loss, Belmont has pioneered a comprehensive therapeutic program that we call our Circle of Friends. This is a whole brain fitness lifestyle, and it's one that combines our highly regarded wellness model with mental fitness. And it has proven to have a profound impact on addressing the needs and abilities of residents with early stage memory loss. We believe in what we call the Just Right Challenge for all of our residents, to keep them involved, to build their confidence, and to have happy, fulfilling days. But the Circle of Friends is certainly changing how providers and their families now look at assisted living and within that, our memory care program. At Belmont Village, we strive to create a positive experience for all of our members. Those include our residents, our employees, and our families. But year after year, we continue to set new standards and are recognized often as a great place to work. My name is Susan Berger, and I am a trusted family advisor. It's always my pleasure to assist families as they navigate the many options in senior living, either for themselves or for a loved one. If you have any questions about a Belmont Village or our world-renowned Circle of Friends program, I do hope that you will give me a call or send me a text. My phone number is 424-232-0701, and my email is sberger@belmontvillage.com. Thank you so much, Kristin, for today, and thank all of you for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you at our next event.